Hey, how's it going? Arthur Wu here for the Cinematography Salon, and today we're doing something a little bit different, a video walkthrough for IGTV. And today's topic is going to be deconstructing or reverse engineering a color grade. So let's get to it. So today I wanted to share with you guys a process that I found that has been helpful for me to understand what colorists are doing to footage I've given them. So, there are often times where I have log footage and I've created a project, usually a personal project, passion project, things like that. And I will hire someone or have someone do the color for me. And if I really like what they did, I will go back to the log footage and try to recreate that and try to really figure out what they've done. Now, this is a series for cinematographers just trying to understand the color grading process and trying to understand it better. That way we can have these conversations with colorists when we go in. My goal is not to say, okay, cinematographers should take over the coloring job as well. Not at all. I think colorists add their own unique perspective and they're very important in the process. And so I just want to make that very clear. We're not trying to take anyone's jobs here. We're just trying to understand it better. So let's go ahead and dive into Davinci Resolve and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. All right, so we're in Davinci Resolve right now. So this was a project that I shot a couple of years ago and sent to a colorist over at 51 Color, Aline, and she did an amazing job at this with very little direction because at the time I really didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't know what I was doing, and so I was like, you know what? Let's just make it poppy. Let's just make it contrasty, like lots of colors and stuff like that. And honestly, that's not a very good description. And if I got that and I was coloring something, I'd be like, all right, well, I could take this a number of different ways. And so we went back and forth a couple of different times, and we settled on this look, and I think it looks great. I love the colors; it fits the mood of the piece. So again, I shot this footage. This was my project, and so I had access to both the color graded phono version and the log version. This was shot on 16 millimeter film, 500T. I spent a little bit of time deconstructing this and it did take a little bit of time to figure it out because I don't have access to all the LUTs and the plugins and all of that your colorist would normally have access to in their suite of tools. So for me, I wanted to start from scratch without any LUTs, without anything, and see, could I get close with just using the regular tools that come in Resolve? And I think I did a decent job. There are some things that are slightly off that could be adjusted, but for the purposes of this video, let's just walk through it. And you can tell here, it only took 3 nodes. They're currently disabled right now, but we'll walk through them one by one. Let's go through the first node. So the very first thing that we want to do is bring back the contrast because we're with I believe this was Cineon log that it was converted to, and essentially we want to get it back to a place where it actually looks decent enough to start grading. And so the primaries, if you're not familiar with, is the big paint brushes that you do on the overall image. That way you can have something nice to work with and tweak from there. So typically that has to do with like contrast, saturation, things of that nature. So if I turn this on, all we're doing is bringing back the contrast. So if you look at the parade, if I turn this off, this on the left-hand side of the parade is the image for the log, and the right-hand side of the parade is the image for the graded version. You can see here the contrast is very high on the graded version, and we need to bring that back on the log version. So you can see when I turn on the primaries, the contrast gets bumped up quite a bit, and I'll show you what I did there. On the lower left-hand side here, we have a contrast control, and I bumped it up from 1 to 1.45. And typically, somewhere around 1.4 or 1.5, when you're dealing with a log image without a LUT, is a good starting point. And so, we got to a place where the primaries look good. The contrast looks good. It's, you can see in the deepest shadows, it looks nice. In the highlights, it's fairly nice. Now, we're not looking at the color at all yet because this is just a primary node. And the main thing I'm noticing is that because we shot in 500T, it's going to be tungsten balanced. And so when we're in daylight, we're going to get this like really blue cast on it because we're not in the right color temperature. So that's something that we're going to have to do in our balance node. And I could have done this in the primaries node, but I like separating it out just because that's the way I've been taught and that's the way that I like thinking about it. Actually, it works a little bit better in my mind. So essentially here we're going to bring back some of the saturation, a little bit of the color, and try to color balance it as well. That way we have a little bit of a better base to work from. So if you hover over this, we're working mainly with the saturation and the hue and the luminance mix. So if I re-enable that, you can see here that if I go back down to the controls here, I have the temperature. I mainly just dealt with the temperature and the tint, and that brought me back into more of that daylight world versus the 500T that we were in. And here as well, let's see, what did I do? We tweaked the primaries bars a little bit in order to get the parade to match up a little bit more. So we're more in that daylight world. But you can still see here that even though we've adjusted a lot, we've come a far way since the beginning log node here by adding the contrast and then by adding the balance here. So this is an okay image, but we're still lacking a lot of color. And the last node here is the hue node, and this actually brings out a lot of the color for me. The HSL, if you're familiar with Photoshop or Lightroom, the hue, the saturation, and the luminance curves, these are very, very powerful. And I think, when I first started out, at least, I overlooked them. I just didn't even know. I was going for the qualifiers, things like that nature. But the hue is big. So for the hue, you can see here we have the hue versus sat, and the luminance. So I'm doing a lot here. The hue versus hue, we're pushing, you'll notice in a lot of Hollywood films that at least the ones that I've studied, there's a pattern there. Not every movie, but there's a pattern where the skies are pushing more towards the cyan. And this version that we have here color graded is a little extreme, but I really like this color. It's poppy. And for a lot of the other films that I really love, if you just look at the skies, they're not just like blue that comes out of the camera, like we have here on the left-hand side. They're like this really nice cyan. So if I enlarge this here, let's see if we can make it bigger. You can see here that it's like this really nice cyan versus like this kind of bluish purplish color, depending on what time of year it is that the sun is going to give you. So, if we go back, let me just enlarge this again. There we go. Let's look at what we did with the hue. We pushed it into the cyan a little bit. We pushed the yellows into the more orange area, and then for the saturation, we pumped up the saturation in the sky, in the blue area, in the cyan, and the red a little bit, and also the luminance. The sky, it was a little bit brighter than the final, so we lowered that as well. And then I think for the let's see, what do we do in this final one here? I think I also did a little bit of adjustments just to do some fine tuning, and when I turn that on, look at that. It looks pretty close, I think. The sky is very close. The sun and then the horizon has that nice dusk feel. It's that pink feeling. And then in the shadows, you can see here, this is what I'm talking about. There's a little bit of tweaking that needs to happen a little bit more for me. But I just wanted to, time is ticking. I wanted to get this video out there. So there's a little bit more, I believe there's a little bit, they're a little bit darker here in the final. And there's a little bit more magenta than cyan. And you can see it's slightly off there. But I would say that this is a very close job, and I didn't have any LUTs. I didn't do anything special. It was just these three nodes. And so now, so what are we taking away from this? Well, basically, the HSL curves are doing the majority of the work. Again, what I can tell here is that we're pushing blue into cyan, and we are pushing yellow into orange. So it's that teal orange look that everyone talks about. That's what we're doing here. And then we're also looking at pumping the saturation up for both the reds and the blues. And then bringing the luminance down, which is something one of my teachers taught me in the skies to really kind of get more of that cinematic look. So this is basically it for reconstructing a look from footage that I've already had. So again, the whole purpose of this video is not that the cinematographer is taking control of the color grade. No, I don't want to do that at all. I actually like the process of giving a little bit of direction, knowing what I'm talking about, which is why we're even doing this series in the first place. So I'm more intelligent when I walk into a color suite and can have that conversation with the colorist and give exact words versus just do something cool. So, I think that is a very valuable thing to learn. So if you have the ability to have a colorist work on a personal project that you've done, you can always go back and try to recreate what they did. That way, when you go back into the color suite, you can have that conversation again and be like, I really like what you did on this project when you shifted these colors in this particular way. Let's try that again, or maybe let's go the opposite. Maybe let's push it the other way. That way, it's not just like, hey, here's a reference, do something cool, because that can lead to a lot of miscommunication. And because when you're telling someone to interpret it their own way without any guidance, you might get something that's completely different. So having that conversation is great, giving a little bit of guidance, but also giving a colorist their experience level and their everything that they've done, giving them some freedom, and you come up with some really cool stuff from that point. So hope that was helpful, guys. Any questions, just post them, and I will talk to you soon. All right, peace.